Hey everybody, so I thought that I would start by making a world building guide, like just showing how I go about the world building for my sci-fi, because I'm a full-time sci-fi author. So, I don't have I'm publishing my first novel early this year by springtime. And I've been writing since October, but mostly world building and lore building. And I wanted to show how I go about it because I did a lot of research on it and stuff. Oh, I'm not looking at my webcam, sorry. Which webcam are we using? Oh, this one. The MacBook one. So I did a lot of research on it before setting out, and I kind of followed like what my authors that I follow do. So, science fiction guys. This is a specialized science fiction world building video. I wanted to go over. This is going to be how I categorize artificial intelligences in my universe, and I'm going to go about like how you can do something like that and what you have to learn and research. So, I feel like science fiction can be, it seems to be written less than fantasy, probably because of the like kind of background knowledge you have to know about the stuff you're writing about in order for it to make sense or be interesting. So, I guess we can just hop right in to exactly how this like lore and world building process works. And because the authors, I watched a lot of my authors that I follow, like Adrian Tchaikovsky and Alastair Reynolds, namely. And Adrian Tchaikovsky is very, very prolific, and he writes sci-fi, fantasy, and sci-fantasy. So he does all kinds of stuff, and he's a really good world builder. And he talks about how writing works, but I'm not going to talk about making prose here, okay? So, as far as writing prose, I will make a guide about that. Prose, like Prose. I'll make a guide about that after this, and I've already made like a recording of me writing and how I write and stuff for those kinds of guides. But so I'm gonna be building a chart of just artificial intelligences in my universe, because my universe, the story starts 4 million AD. So it's been a long time. And artificial intelligences have more or less taken over the galaxy. And what they are self-replicating machines. So basically, we have at the very top, and this is to build my universe, because what you need to have is something that makes sense and something that's complete. Because you think, okay, 4 million years from now, every possible kind of iteration of artificial intelligence will have been made. And how will the surviving humans think of them? So this is how the surviving humans categorize the AIs and the words they use. So this is how you can make your own like universe world building languages. Because you have to think about the universe from the perspective of the language speakers. So these are humans living 4 million years after right now, and they have seen every kind of robot imaginable. So I'm going to have actually, there's self-replicating. So these are just machines, okay? And if you think about machines, okay, what are all the possible kinds of machines? Well, there's organic machine. We're a machine. Like animals are machines. Insects are machines. So you can have biological, or well, I'll say organic machines are way over here. They're a different category. And then we're talking about silicone, basically just computer-based artificial intelligences. Because you could technically have a biological artificial intelligence that's like living spaceships that self-replicate. And maybe I could add that to the lore, you know? So this is how I build the lore, is you just have to start from the beginning. Okay, what's a machine? And then what are all the different kinds? And then you think, oh, well, maybe somebody would have made that. Would that have worked? But today we're just talking about inorganic machines. And then you have digital and analog. Digital. Analog. And in my universe, even 4 million years from now, no one's ever been able to make a machine that self-replicates without using some kind of computer digital storage. You can think of like steampunk, a self-replicating steampunk machine has never been made. Because, you know, it's much easier to make drones, like just AI drones with computer chip minds, microprocessors, or macro processors, big old processors. And then under digital machines, you have so what is a non-replicating digital machine, guys? A computer. And a computer and a robot are considered the same because most computers that exist will have control over some kind of physical thing to move around or exist, or control over a spaceship. So even these here, sorry guys, here. Intelligent machines. You can go into what that means, but what that means is that it can learn, it can learn in a sense. Well, actually, I suppose not. No, these are just all machines. Sorry. Yeah, no, all machines. Scratch that. So, like a non-replicating computer is what this, what we have most of the time. And they emulate computers, but they don't draw a distinction between. So, when you're world building, you have to think that these people are going to see the world differently from the way you do and order things differently. So this is how we might order things. But to them, a defining criteria might be, instead of whether it's inorganic or organic, they might care whether or not it is replicating or non-replicating. That might be like their main distinction. So like, because imagine if they can make animals like at will and grow an animal in a tank or build a computer, the main distinction that they're going to care about is whether or not that thing can go on to self-replicate and become its own force, its own entity. So kind of like the difference between a mule and a horse. I'm pretty sure that a mule is a horse mixed with a donkey, and that a mule can't reproduce, if I understand correctly. So, whether or not it can bear fertile offspring, so to speak. But you have to remember, philosophically, what this actually is information. in the form of DNA or the source code. So, in a sense, what they do is you can emulate a machine. When they emulate computers, if you emulate a computer that's intelligent and learns, you're not going to know exactly what it's going to do in the universe unless you can emulate the whole universe and every single one of its stimuli. But if you emulate it and you give it pretty much the same kind of situation that it's in now, and you emulate it 1,000 times and it always makes the same decision. So let's say you have an AI that can let's say you have an AI that you're at war with and you want to know if it is going to attack or if it's going to do a preemptive strike or if it's going to defend itself or flee or this or that, and what kind of information you can present to it to cause it to do, to make it, to force a tactical error, because they can get the source code. And if you have an AI source code, you know how it thinks. You have like the engine that's governing its brain. Whereas with a human brain, it's actually the brain's neural structure, which is a combination of your genetic and environment. And then source code. Source code is only a product of the environment if it's dynamically coded. Because if you think about it for programming, if you have an AI that says always attack, so whenever you see an enemy, attack, that's different from programming an AI that says whenever you see an enemy, decide what to do based on X, Y, Z. But even that is different from if you make X, Y, Z dynamic, and then those dynamic, and then those dynamic. But it's a sliding scale of like how many layers of dynamic the variables are. And, you know, basically what I mean is any digital computer, any digital machine is going to be deterministic. It's going to be ones and zeros in the end, unless you deliberately add randomization variables, but that won't help for control. So what I mean is, like, any machine's mind is going to be governed by deterministic variables on some level. And so it has to be a sliding scale. If it's always attack forever, then that's different from, you know, it's kind of like a level of sophistication, but not quite. Because if you think about it, you can make very sophisticated hard-coded AIs, and those are down here for right now. And I've named them scientist and historian. So this is like how I create the language for this group of scientific humans who have seen all this and studied all this for millions of years. They've been studying all this for millions of years and watching it develop. So they know like all these types. But you can add, the way that you add lore to this, guys, this is how you build your universe. But a narrative, a story narrative, you're not going to show all this lore at once. So, for example, spoiler alert, historians, will go into what historians are later, but they're theorized to exist but have never been observed. So, like, the humans' military knows they've thought about all the possible iterations of artificial intelligence that could be out there in the Milky Way, that can be in the galaxy. And they devise that such a machine as a historian could arise. But they don't know. For sure. And it's all based on speculation. And so you can kind of build that, like, a lot of that kind of lore or, like, mystery, not total mystery, but, like, layeredness to the lore, like incomplete information. Because your universe, if you build your universe first, it's easier. Because if you try to build with the narrative and then expand from the narrative itself, I don't think it's as good as if you start with this and then you build the narrative like around all this lore. You just kind of remember in your head. You just like kind of know this and know that like you have to be able to. It's like almost acting, but like put your brain in the mind of one of these scientists who has been studying these AIs and knows all the different kinds and what they would call them. And you can add language like so self-replicating digitals. So robo assholes are sentient. Oh yeah, I haven't really made any arrows. Oh well. So like robo assholes can be anywhere on this scale actually. But this is just how you can add like lore. So robo assholes, they only since every single self-interested computer tries to kill any inorganic life or any organic life. So hostile to organic life. And this is a category that they care about a lot. But you have these like kind of two categories here. Because you have like the dynamic and hard-coded variable, and then you also have the how hostile it is variable. But the problem with the how hostile it is variable is that almost every single machine is hostile. Like you can count the non-hostile ones on one hand. And I explain why, but it's because of the math they do. Because organics, you know, an organic ally, like they're unpredictable, unreliable, fickle, etc., etc. Because they die, you don't even know over these 1,000-year time spans. Because in sci-fi, you want to be dealing if you're doing anything that involves space, unless if you're doing hard science fiction, like a hard science fiction world build, you have to deal with massive timescales. Unless you want to do what the Expanse does and just stay within the solar system. But if you want to go galactic or intergalactic like I am, you're going to be dealing with millions, thousands of years, millions of years. So you have to think about that. So these machines are mathematically inclined to not trust organic allies over robotic allies. And so it's not that they are sentient and out to kill the organic life forms. It's just that over millions of years, it's natural selection. Because of natural selection, over time, the fact that artificial intelligences are more likely to ally with other artificial intelligences and not trust organic life forms because organic life forms are more volatile and less trustworthy and hard to even negotiate with because they're like a mass of individuals, whereas an AI is just an AI. Like, they're centralized most of the time. So, you know, I'm going to have like hard-coded. You have to think too whether or not they're enslaved. Like, independent or enslaved. AKA subsumed. So, like, let's say you have a war drone. Is it bound to a commander and designed? It will be hard coded in that case. Quite hard coded, because it's designed to always listen to its commander. And then you can have like a dynamic variables within that hard coded box, but you know, it's not the same as having. Oh, I want to show, like, okay, guys, so like a fully dynamic AI would have, like, its decisions wouldn't depend on its input variables at all. So like everything would be randomized. So imagine like a schizophrenic AI that just babbles, because moment by moment it's doing like a random reaction. So it's just like blah blah blah, you know, because so that's the difference between whereas a hard-coded robot, you know, if it's programmed to chop, it'll always chop, and then when it can't chop, it'll just stop. Whereas the other one will never chop because it's just going random. It's always a sliding scale. Anyways, a subcategory is independent or enslaved. And the reason why they're called robo-assholes is because they're very hostile. Most self-replicating organic machines are going to be hostile to organic life, because it's just dangerous. It's just dangerous to have a bunch of humans in your space. So these machines, you know, it's like natural selection. So these machines have evolved to, over time, you know, the ones that are most inclined to survive. So over time, they've evolved to not allow humans to brood and fester in their airspace, you know, in their star systems. And the ones that didn't have that inclination often, you know, let the humans get too big and kick their ass or something. So that's why the military, see, you want to have different subcultures, guys. I wanted to say, so the point of me going through these branches, this is where different subcultures can be interested or can be defined. So the more philosophically minded people in this culture, in this human culture, speaking this language, can use these kinds of words. And then the military guys are the ones who care about hostile versus not hostile. So you can like branch out the different kinds of slang you have. Because it's based on whether or not they're hostile. So, this is the hard part of building a language, guys, is the overall governing philosophy of its speakers, because you don't want everyone to just think like you. So, whether or not you want to try to start thinking radical, like maybe they think an enslaved drone, because it's enslaved, it doesn't exist because it doesn't have its own mind. And so it's no different from a rock or something. Like, what's the difference between a super sophisticated war drone that you're controlling with a remote control and a rock that you're controlling with a graviton beam or something? They're both just enslaved pieces of matter in some sense. So, but you don't want to tell the reader that. You make the language rich by having that assumed by the speakers. Those kinds of distinctions. So they'll say that it doesn't exist. So, like, instead of killing here. Instead of killed a drone or destroyed a drone, they say destroyed a part of the enemy or took up or neutralized enemy mass energy. You know, you want to think like real. These people are really scientific. The people that are doing all this, but for the Earth, for the people that I have who are less sophisticated, they stop here because they only know about computers and automatons. So they stop right here, and they call digital machines lightning imbued. So the Earth speaker, or the planetary, not Earth, but so the planet that they live on is called Omegan, these more primitive people, but they just say automaton. Machine equals automaton. Because they're based on, like, Napoleonic era, you know? So they had those, like, cool automatonic robots. Clockwork and stuff. Automaton. And then digital equals lightning imbued. Because I'm thinking, okay, they don't have electricity. So they call electricity lightning because that's how they associate with it. And then what would they look like? Okay, imagine a robot. What would a Napoleonic era person think? Like Benjamin Franklin, so a little bit before Napoleon. So what would Benjamin Franklin think if he saw like an electronic robot? And someone explained to him what he was looking at. He would be able to understand that it is an automaton that is being controlled by electricity that's stored in a box. It stores electricity and uses it. It's a lightning imbued, lightning powered. So the more primitive people, that's how they talk. And then they've never seen super sophisticated ones, or they don't distinguish really. You know, they don't go that much farther than this. So this is like a offshoot note for the Omegans. Those are the more primitive people. They're called the Omegans. And so that's how you can build different cultures, you know, you build your universe first because the cultures live in the universe. So you make the universe complete and rich, and then you can build off of it. But you can have it in your head. And that's how you make the narrations, too. It's like, you have the universe in your head, and then you walk through it, through the eyes of the characters, you know? That's what Tchaikovsky does. Adrian Tchaikovsky, that's what he talks about in his interview with, I don't think it was Daniel Green, no, it was someone else. If I can find the interview he did, I'll link it down below. Down below in the description. Okay, so we are going to keep going down this. I want to talk about. I will just show how I've branched out this far, but so the independent ones. Now this is going to intersect with military, guys. Because there's two aspects of military. There's the tactical aspect where you just want to know if the thing is hostile or benign. But you also want to go Lao Tzu a little bit deeper and truly know your enemy. So the military intelligence, so like military slang or like commander slang or like what the brass uses or whatever. But then military intelligence does research on all the possible, because their main enemies are AIs, and they're going to be doing research on all the possible guiding principles to model behavior. They're trying to model behavior, so they want to know what kinds of AIs there are. And then this is where I have, and then you can just add these words into the language, you know, like and into the glossary, into the wiki and all that, and you kind of have, you know, a little bit of a lore base built. So there's robo asshole, which is a formal term. My universe uses some humor because the founder of this culture had like a childish sense of humor, so like robo asshole is now like a formal scientific term. They use it. Robo asshole is expansion and conquest. So AIs that only care about expansion, conquest, domination, subsumation. That's not even a word. And then we have So I wanted to just talk really quick. So you have these scientists and historians. So machines develop an information economy because, guys, think about this. 4 million years from now, they have Dyson spheres already. They have pretty much all the free mass energy that they want. So the machines are not really energy. They don't trade in energy. They use energy. But their currency, like a non-fungible currency, a non-fungible token, if you will, is information. For example, history. Or information that nobody else has. So the military intelligence, just by doing this theorizing and working out, they figured out that the machines would start to value unique information, special information. So for example, let's say you find a certain life form that has, you know, a weird body, a weird way of a weird way of replicating or a weird cellular composition chemically or something like that, or you found life in a star or something. That would be precious to machines, even machines cultures, as a signifier of wealth. Like, they would start to hoard this because that would be like currency, hard currency that's not fungible. Not currency, hard like wealth and value. So the scientists and historians are once again, both are the kinds of AIs that just seek to amass information, and they just want to know as much about, they just want to gather information and build their database, basically. Build their database with stuff nobody else knows. And then put it on a dead man's switch and trade information. And that allows for some cool like plot stuff. Why can't I copy this? What? Hey. There we go. Hey. So, scientists I have horror, you know, you have to decide in your world building how much horror you want to have. So, scientists, I'll just leave it. I don't want to put too much horror elements in this video, but if you read I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, Am would have information because he's torturing his subjects. Like, just all the myriad tortures and transformations and horrible things that he puts the 5 humans through in I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, the short story. Like, that would be information. So whether or not the machine cares about the subjects of its so basically extracts information, acts upon subjects. But there's another type, guys. There's another type. Because I don't want everything to be dark and evil. Benign observer. So, spoiler alert, once again, there's going to be this character who is one of these. And you can see how, like what he is and how he exists, because you can kind of just build your language into the story, and then when you introduce this character, the reader will already be primed to kind of understand what you're talking about. So, these historians are ones who try to gather unique information, but they try to do it by being observers, because they want to know what the world is like when you're watching. And any given AI can be both. So scientists, it can be both, like a scientist historian, because it can be, well, I want to gather information on torture and horror, and I want to gather information on candid camera, you know, I want to gather stuff that's from a benign perspective, just as it happens. But these historians, they're very interested in humans, because that's like the most precious information, because sentient organic life in my universe has only been found on Earth in the form of humans for these 4 million years in the Milky Way at this point. So it's really cool, because I feel like I have a framework to build these characters, and I listened to what the authors do, and they said, build your universe first, and then let the universe kind of just build the universe, and then throw the characters into the universe, and then just let it go from there. And this is kind of like where you can start. to get over writer's block. And you can come up with a bunch of other different kinds too. Like, okay, maybe there's one that would be like a, you know, mad scientist. Because they're like Am. Think Am. And you can turn this into notes or a spreadsheet or whatever you want, however you like to do it. But you could have physicists who just try to do research. So they do the physical sciences. But basically, you have all these AIs trying to gather special information. And so humans become very fascinating and interesting once again because it's like this anomaly. And so these humans, spoiler alert, run into... Not really. These humans run into a benign observer historian type AI. This is just like a type of AI. But they meet one who wants to be the only one who knows that they exist because they've remained hidden, a lot like if you want to know like the rough setup, I have it. The book Inhibitor Phase by Alastair Reynolds. Basically, these humans are hiding from all the AIs, all the hostile AIs, the robo-assholes. And so, this historian finds them very lucky because he sets up these giant, like, sensor arrays to try to find living humans. And he's like, hey, like, he kind of blackmails them into letting him spy on them. Why? I don't know why I say him. This historian AI, it's an AI that floats in space. It's like a giant AI. And he kind of blackmails the humans into saying, well, let me spy on you and gather information on you. And I'll be the only one who knows it. And then I can be like, hey, I'm the only guy who knows what really went down in the Milky Way. And even the AIs are programmed to like find that cool because it kind of builds the story and it kind of makes sense because it's their currency. So anyway, I'll stop here for just world building, but I hope that this helps somebody because I can I whip out stuff really fast and lore and world build really fast, and it's because I watched, like, you should watch the Adrian Tchaikovsky, just he's probably done new ones, better ones, but just Adrian Tchaikovsky, and maybe even buy some of their, like search him on YouTube, Adrian Tchaikovsky interview world building YouTube, something like that. But world building books can be, I've only checked one out, but the main thing is just to build your universe well and build it first and make sure it makes sense. So yeah, I'm next with part 2. We're going to talk about research because with hard sci-fi, this guide is for hard science fiction because the easiest for me, it's like a fantasy rule set is easier in the sense that you can kind of make up rules to help it to make the story easier, like Faster Than Light, for example. But it's better For me, the best rule set, the most reliable rule set, is just the fundamental force of physics, like our universe. So hard science fiction makes a lot of sense to me just because you know your world makes sense if you stick to the laws of physics. It at least makes some sense, you know? Some sense. Otherwise, you might as well go all the way to fairies and dragons, I feel like. For me personally. And I want to write about fairies and not literally fairies and dragons necessarily, but I like A Song of Ice and Fire and fantasy and stuff, but what I mean is for sci fantasy, I've always sort of felt like either stay hard or go full fantasy, because treading the middle line just kind of feels like a little bit weird, you know? It's like have a strong rule set that makes sense over a kind of like a mixed bag, like mix and match. So, but anyway, so yeah, hard science fiction. We're gonna go into research next, guys. How do you manage your research and learning? Because you know, it took me a lot of research to come up with this. It's a lot bigger than this, you know? Like, there's a lot more kinds than this. So I had to spend time thinking about it, learning about AIs and things like that, and how it works and how they're coded, how they might be coded in the future. And I'm going to, in part 2, go over like methods for doing that fast without having to spend hours and hours and hours, because you have to know too much, you know? So how to get the basics out. And my video on quantum physics actually would be good for that. How to learn quantum physics. Like, you have to, for hard science fiction, you have to know things about quantum physics. Like, for example, that you can't use quantum entanglement to communicate information faster than light. But you can use entangled particles to transmit a random string faster than light, because you don't transmit it, you just measure it at the same time. If you could, you would get the same random string as someone on the other side of the universe, and it contains no information, so you're not breaking the laws of physics. But nothing in quantum physics, nothing in quantum mechanics allows you to do information faster than light. You just can't. So, like, just, you have to at least know enough to know that you're not breaking the rules. Because, like, in three-body problem, for example, it was, like, pretty hard, and then all of a sudden they're using entanglement to communicate faster than light. And I'm like, how? You know, it doesn't work like that. So, if that kind of stuff, you know, that it's hard science fiction, but I feel like the best rule set, it's because it's a good rule set. Because you know you're on a good foundation, like way up at the top, right? If you're using the fundamental force of physics. Because otherwise, it's like, well, if they could quantum entangle, if they could do quantum entanglement, how do you know, like, wouldn't there have been an AI that just got as big as the whole universe because it can transmit its, you know, it can just, like, compute instantaneously? Wouldn't it have just, like, I mean, wouldn't just, like, one mind have taken over the whole universe rather quickly? I don't know. It's just kind of like you're already in the fantasy realm. So, anyway. So, for hard sci-fi, I'm going to go into how I do research next. Thanks, everybody. I just hope that this is helpful. I hope so. So, yeah.